In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. The last time I spoke, I talked to you about the need that we have for a political party of our own. We need a pragmatic political party council in every major city in the United States to address the immediate issues that we are confronted with, that we suffer, so that we can organize, use a method that is efficient to address those problems, and with hope to solve those problems. Because none of the other political parties have worked for us. And none of the aspirants to your political allegiance are making logical sense. When it comes to addressing the many varied social problems that we face as African Americans and as Latino Americans and Indigenous Americans and so forth. But I am saying that as an African American, we need, as descendants of slaves, to organize ourselves around an efficient political model that will work for us. Now, anyone who's ever gone to law school will tell you that two of the most difficult courses to master in law school are property law and contract law. Property law in the United States dates back to Old English common law, which dates back to feudalism and the way that property was owned and the way that property rights were handed down from one generation to the next. There's also a bit of Roman law involved in our property laws here in the United States. And I'm only saying this to make the point that so deeply embedded is property law and the relations that we have concerning property, whether we are owners of property or whether we are renters of property. We are bound, we are tied by ancient property laws, and they're not going to go away tomorrow. They're not going to go away in your lifetime. People have evolved socially sentiment, emotional attachments to private ownership of things, not just personal items, of course, but to property that they own. Some people date their property ownership relations back generations. And so there are deep sentimental ties to the land that they live on or that they own. Aristotle, 2,000 plus years ago, formalized the reason for private property. He said that, in short, private property should be practiced in a nation so that individuals will be emotionally vested in the survival of the nation as a whole. In other words, he argued that if an individual were allowed to own some of the nation, however small that fraction of the nation may be, it could be his or her own business or land. But that person, Aristotle argued, will be more than willing to fight for the survival of that nation, even if the government is corrupt, because that person would understand that if the nation falls, so falls their private property, their personal sovereignty, if you will, over land and the workers that they hire. And yes, this dates back to slavery. And we know that because we, descendants of slaves, were chattel property at one time in the United States. So we understand how tied and bound people can become to what they own, because over 500,000 people died in the Civil War to break that sentiment. And that sentiment has not gone away, even though the practice of slavery is now outlawed constitutionally. Now, there are people who espouse different ideologies. We talked about that. And we see fragmentation in our relations as African Americans, even in terms of family members. We see almost infinite fragmentation, making it seem impossible that we could ever unite on the basis of ideology or philosophy or religion or mythology, or even on the basis of apathy, to come together to address the major issues facing us in the 21st century. We need a political party that, despite our ideological, mythological, and religious differences, can give us a reason, a superordinate reason to work together locally to address specific issues that are socioeconomic and political in nature. Now, there are those that you will hear on the internet who will espouse different ideological remedies for our problems. I disagree with them. I disagree with Chris Hedges and his socialistic orientation, his ideological orientation. I disagree with Dr. Cornel West with his socialist Christian ethos. And I disagree with others who espouse socialism for us as a solution to our problems. For instance, Dr. Richard Wolff continually preaches Marxism. Dr. Cornel West preaches socialism. And Chris Hedges preaches the golden age, a return to the golden age of America, which we know is a fantasy. There has not ever been a golden age that we need to return to so that we can right the wrongs of the society in which we live today. African Americans today have major problems that are existential in nature. That is to say, we are facing the prospect of extinction in this nation as a group of people with a unique history and unique perspective in this society. We are facing awesome demographic transition issues. In California, for instance, thousands of African Americans have fled the state. Its population, in terms of the numbers of African Americans who live in the state of California, has dropped significantly over the past 10 years from about 7.7% to 5.5% in the 2018 census. And they're fleeing to other states where they believe they may have better opportunities or where the cost of living is cheaper. And so we are facing this situation in which we're running out of places to go. There is no place to run anymore in America. We are on the square, no matter where we go. And on the square, we are facing those conditions which are confronting us and making for an existential threat to us. The death rate is increasing in our community. If you only consider COVID-19 alone, and the near 100,000 deaths in the African American community, I think that arithmetically you will understand that the death rate is coming very, very close to challenging the birth rate, which suggests a decline in our population, a general decline. And it's happening, of course, in the white community. Because in many states, the death rate is higher for white people than the birth rate. So it can happen, and it is happening in the African American community. We're facing climate change issues, most of which are far beyond our control. Tipping points have been crossed, and we're going to have to organize ourselves socially and politically in order to survive this century. And many of us will not survive, but we must organize so that some of us survive. We face the age-old problem of our sojourn in the United States of ignorance and disease. Over a third of our children cannot read a standard 12-inch ruler, which of course means they don't know their basic arithmetic. They don't know their multiplication tables. They don't understand fractions and division problems in arithmetic. How can you build anything if you cannot measure? It has been said by thinkers before, to measure is to know. We still face substance abuse problems. We face crime, assaults and batteries and murders in our own communities against our own people continue to be problematic. And we have not a justice system, nor the self-determination to bring those behaviors to a halt. And so we suffer from them. What we need is our own political party. We don't need socialism. We don't need communism. And we don't have to subscribe to capitalism, but we must work within the context that we are subject to. It is unavoidable. Many of the people who espouse socialism and communism and other forms of government, well, guess what? They have bank accounts and they own homes. They have equity growing in their properties. And so I say that to make the point that it's unavoidable to adapt and do the best you can under the circumstances into which you were born. And also, let me say that what we don't need are sales for Bitcoin or some other illusory monetary fantasy. We don't need preaching. We don't need mythology. And we don't need, again, ideology. And we don't need those things in a new political party so that we can come together without having those divisive arguments that for over 100 years have done us very, very little good as a group, as a whole. Perhaps in your personal life, you can see some changes. I agree to that. But as a whole, when we look at the big picture, we come to see that those ideological, religious, or mythological orientations push us apart. They do not bring us together. So we need the purpose of the pragmatic political party, a pragmatic political party in every community. And we need that kind of party to generate political power. We need that kind of party to generate political power to make our lives grow, just as the basis of all life on this earth is the vegetative foundation, plants that sustain all life are sustained by the sun that generates the heat And that's what we need our political party to do, is to generate the motion, to define the issues, to energize us, to make changes in our local levels first. That is to say, we should be organizing our political efforts, electing people that are going to run for local offices and city councils as mayors. And then at the county level, we should nominate individuals who subscribe to our orientation of pragmatic politics to hold office, to become sheriffs. At the state level, we should organize to nominate individuals to run for state government positions and the position of governor, not in the Democratic Party, not in the Republican Party, not in the Libertarian Party, because you will never lead those parties in the direction that is in your best interest. They are always going to be controlled by big money, and big money is controlled by very, very wealthy elitist white supremacists. However liberal they may appear, understand that they are a product of the function of white supremacist institutions in this society. And we must also nominate individuals to run at the federal level, the fourth level. But we focus first on the local level, and we gain our strength and our experience and our know-how at that level to then address issues at the county, state, and federal level. What pragmatic political party method involves is issue metrics. Issue metrics is the gathering of data that helps us to define the socioeconomic and political issues that are most important and should be prioritized in our local communities. That means, again, to measure so that we know. We go out, whether it be on our block or whether it be on a larger area, and describe a condition that is problematic for us. It could be potholes on your street. It could be drug houses on your street. Whatever that condition is, you measure it numerically, you define how it is corrosive to your best interests, and you take it to the next level. You address it at your city council meetings or your county council meetings, and you demand a solution. And of course, you nominate individuals to run for offices so that they work for you. And then we explain the condition. We don't just present them with the data. We stand before them and we explain the condition based upon our measurements so that our definitions of the problems are narrowly defined and not far out, so that they're not comprehensible, and so that they understand that they are immediate problems that we face and that they must be addressed. Thus, we evaluate the conditions. In other words, we prioritize. There's going to be conditions that are worse than others, and all conditions cannot be addressed at the same time, but they can be addressed in due order. We prioritize. And once we take those first three steps, describe the problem, we explain the problem, we evaluate the problem, then we can prepare a forecast. In other words, if we do not act now, then it is highly likely that the problem will grow and overwhelm us, just as the incarceration rate over the past 50 years has grown to such an extent that we have generations of African Americans now in communities that are totally marginalized from having opportunities or choices for jobs and education in our society. Because we have generations of men and women now who have filtered through the prison system and who are now excluded by law from full participation in our society. That has happened over 50 years. Whole neighborhoods have become excluded by virtue of having so many citizens who cannot find a way to make a life for themselves because of having a felony record or even perhaps a county jail record. And so, again, understand that property law is not going to change in America tomorrow, but we must find a way to navigate this very difficult situation that we are in, to navigate the many existential threats to our communities, and to demand justice and understand justice will not come freely from the Republicans, the Democrats, the Libertarians, the Socialists, the Communists, et cetera, et cetera. We must make justice flow for ourselves. We must make it happen. So I'm going to continue to address the need for us to have a pragmatic political party that has an agenda defined by the conditions in which we live, minus ideology, minus mythology, minus religious debate. Because if we can do that, if we can do that on a small scale, no matter where we live, we will become a stronger group with a louder voice, even though our numbers are diminishing. And I think that we will then have a chance, a better chance, to succeed, to survive, than if we don't. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.